super tired. I am very tired right now. I could probably sleep for a week at this point. But I did it. We did it. Oh, here's the, I didn't post any picture for a thumbnail, but this one tickled me a little bit. I may see if I can get some gold leafing. I did some weird things this month, I'm not going to lie. Definitely some weird things. Alrighty, so I did it. I made 26 items in the month of February. If my monitor falls off and breaks, I'm going to be very disappointed. So we started with the micro origami. And I figured I was having a little bit of trouble getting to the point where I could do, there was a visual, I can't even remember what it was now. It's like, it's some archaic, weird, artsy terminology for a type of artwork that I was thinking of doing, and it just turned out to be more difficult than it was worth trying. So I actually I spent a lot of the afternoon trying to figure out, like, what am I going to replace it with? And I did a look at my list, and my list had vellum, victory, vase, and VFTA or whatever it was. What did I even have it as? I probably deleted it at this point because it wasn't worth pursuing. So, Visual Focus Depth Art, VFDA. Yeah, no, I didn't feel the need to do that. But looking at the rest of it, I said, well, I started with origami, so I could finish with origami. So I made an origami vase, because vase, and it's one of the options I laid out as a possibility. And there were a couple things like that were a little tricky to get done. I debated. I actually had a phone call with my mom last night. Was it last night? No, it was the night before. Asking, okay, so the ZX and a few other things are very limited as what you can come up with. And so I said, well, I kind of figured ZD would be a good one to try. And I'm like, I could make a baked ZD, like a dinner. But I don't really eat a lot of pasta, and I don't do well with red sauce. And so, like, or remembering my childhood, I'm like, remember when we used to make like necklaces out of macaroni or picture frames out of pasta? And I went, I could do something interesting with that. So I took out one of the ziti noodles and I proceeded to carve it before metal coating it to get it's holes all the way through in the middle. Stop switching. Stop swinging. I'm trying to show the holes in the middle that you can kind of see right through them. Yeah. But yeah, so I did that. And that one was kind of just funny to goof around with. Actually took more time than one would think would take to do that. What else did I do? I made the necklace. I think I showed that last time. I did some bookbinding. I did a Coptic stitch cover for a hexagonal book, and unfortunately, actually, is it over there? Let's see if I can grab it. I mean, it's an okay binding, and actually, I'm surprised it's doing this well, and it's this thin, because it's like, I think it's just short of 100 pages. I did it right. The cover's a little too bowy because the chipboard that I used is too thin. By getting the edges lined up right, I would, if I were to do this for real in the future, I would just after cut trim them all straight. But the other problem I had was, and this was sort of what I thought might be the case and why I wanted to test it out, was that sort of that short binding side means that there's a little give in the rotation of the orientation of the pages, and so it's not really super stable. Like, I can hold it like this and it does fine. There's just like the pages aren't lined up with the cover, and it's just not a sturdy enough binding, I don't think, for what I wanted to do with it. But it was worth a thought. I might try a perfect binding, which is just a glued spine, and see if that works better for the hexagonal book format. I'm not sure it's something that can actually be done for what I need to do it for, or want to do it for. I don't need to. Seeing if I got anything else around me of what I worked on this last few days. So I'll pull up my list and see what so we did. Oh, I did acrylic paint pour, which was, if you've ever looked online, you can see the people who do those. They mix different colors of paint and turn the cup upside down on a canvas, and it spreads out and makes a marbled pattern. And sometimes they're cells, like little bubbles that pop and mix in these little circles within the marbling pattern. I wanted to give that a try because there are a couple things I wanted to experiment. I didn't do a great job of it. I ended up with a sort of like a slate blue gray with hints of blue marbling. And it's all right. I can use them as backdrops for other painting processes. And I learned a little bit about the process. It's not an easy one. I did, oh, where did I put those? They might be over there. I did some chalk carving. Were you here for? Probably not. I also did some plaster carving, which is yeseria, and I did Xerox art, vase, sgraffito. So I don't know if I showed these the last time. This is the sgraffito, a wind rose. And that's a layer of like a clay, almost like a stucco on the bottom for me. I didn't want to waste perfectly good clay for that. So I used like the byproduct, some of the leftovers from refining the clay we dug up in the yard, and made a layer of that, and then a layer of plaster, and you scratch through. I made my layer of plaster a little too thick, I think. So it was more like a candy shell rather than a layer you can scrape away. But pyrography, origami, napkin rings we did. Oh, I made my mask. Ta-da! It's a nice fabric. I found it at the local Walmart. Kind of dig it. It's double-sided. I don't know if it's going to work right now. I have to work on the inversion process, but it's the other side. And then, so that was mask, knife, leather, jewelry, inlay, hair, glass, felt, egg paint, chalk carving, I think was the bookbinding, the chalk carving, the acrylic paint, ziti, yeseria, sgraffito, Xerox art. Those were the big ones, and the vase was the final one I did. And the mask. So yeah, I'm super tired because I've been full charge running at a bunch of projects lately. Let me see if I can find the carved chalk. What did I do? Yeah, don't you pick that fight. There we go. What did I do with it? That's the ZD. No. I have no idea what I did with it. I cannot find it. I have misplaced it. What did I do with it? What did I do with it? What did I do with it? I know I had them. I had them earlier today, actually. What did I do with them? I'm sure when I was trying to work on another project, I just shuffled them off to somewhere else, and now I won't remember where I put them. I got my scanner up and running, and I used it to do the Xerox art. It's not technically Xerox, but let's see. The carvings, let's see. I got the plaster one over here, I think. This was fun for a first attempt, but I don't know if it's showing up on the camera real well. I don't have the camera right in front of me. So it's a Celtic knot carved into plaster. Probably scrub it off a little bit more now that it's more dry. Because when it's moist and wet, it tends to crumble real easily, and that's helpful when you're trying to do a little scratch away of a piece of a surface, but it gets more problematic when you're not super careful with it. It'll take away a whole section before you even know it. So that was the sgraffito and the yeseria. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm any great shakes at it, but I still think that's pretty cool. And I gotta figure out what I did with the carved chalk, because it's very similar. Chalk is very similar to plaster of Paris once it's set, and you have to do certain things to it to make it workable. So basically, you would take a piece of like writing chalk. Yeah, it's basically you're not taking like whittled pieces off. You're scraping flakes off, and more often than not, you're drawing a line with the blade of the thing you're carving with, and then you're using the back to just scrape away pieces to bring it down and level with that line. Oh, come on, I know I have this somewhere. I'm sure I do. What did I do with it? Come on. I'm sure it's scintillating content for you to be watching the blank screen behind where I sit. I don't know if you can hear me either. What did I do with it? That's too bad. Oh, here they are. There we go. Found them. Okay, so the first little one. This one really did it for me today. I started with I made a pawn from a piece of chalk. So I carved that. That was pretty rudimentary. And then I was going at it, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to see if I can carve a decorative dowel with a heart on top. And the heart snapped off. So that one was sort of like, okay, fine, you're going to be a jerk about it. So we got this little heart. And then the last one I did, I just like, I had blue, red, yellow, orange, purple, and I think those were the colors of chalk I had. And I had this yellow one, and I'm like, what am I going to make with a yellow chalk? A key, a golden key. It's a stick of drawing chalk with a key on top. And so that's what I made. And that's kind of fun. It's also very prone to have that snap. I actually feel like it might be easier to do the pencil tip carving. If you've ever seen the people who carve things out of pencil tips, I think that's a little less likely to just like, because that crumbles so easily. It's, you wet it with water. You soak it in water first, and it actually chirps as it absorbs the water. And once it's absorbed the water, you're really just scraping away this sort of mushy chalk, and you're hoping you don't put too much pressure in one direction. Because that's one of the things that was interesting was, as I was doing this, one of the things that you're thinking as you're going is you're like, scrape. No, you don't scrape that way, because what you're doing is you're applying even the smallest amount of pressure as you scrape your blade along it, but that pressure is giving leverage to this far out point, so it can try to bend, and this won't bend. It won't flex. It won't do anything. It's just full on going to crumble off. So you have to carve the top first and work your way down, and then don't put any pressure on the tip again, and don't dig too deep at the base. And it's just sort of like, it's fun. There's some skill to it that I haven't quite mastered, but I did all right with a couple simple ones. Having some fun with just some of the weird ones. I have to admit, I did take a few moments where I wasn't working on projects over the last couple days where I looked online at the possibility of getting a setup that would be sort of like the webcam, but it's like a microscope. Because I wonder, like, I made that micro origami piece, and I can carve small things on chalk. I wonder if I could get much smaller with like a carpenter's pencil with like the rectangular graphites. And so I keep thinking, like, I wonder if I could do like smaller and smaller scale art crafty things. And if I can, like, there is a natural limit. Like when I was doing the book binding, I think earlier today, and the sewing for the mask, putting the thread through the eye of the needle was about the limit of what my eyes can do on their own. And I feel like if I had something that augmented my vision enough to make even smaller things, I could go really far with that. And there's a part of me is like, this could be fun to try. I'm very curious to see what I could probably pull off. And so I was looking at some of those, I think it's like a USB microscope. So it could be as many as little as 40 times magnification to 1,000 times magnification. And I'm like, golly, what could I do with that? What would be the fun project to do something like that with? I mean, there's always the how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin kind of thing, as just sort of like a joke. But I just trying to think, what else could I do with it? I know I did a little looking in a while back of the people who write on grains of rice. I'm like, there's a part of me that wants to try to do that too. And that one is a little trickier. It's not just like go to it. It's like you have to learn how to sense when your heart is beating so that you only make motions and make a mark when you're between heartbeats. There's a guy out there actually, there are a couple people who do artwork in the eye of a needle. And that seems a little steep, but it might be kind of fun to try. I would probably start with seeing what I could do with grains of rice. Although I feel like the grain of rice thing is it's one of those you go back and forth. Like I might be able to very easily like get to the point where I could do a nice piece of calligraphy on a grain of rice. And I would wager if I could do that, I could very reasonably sell those. And that's the thing. It's sort of like the heart-shaped napkin ring situation, where you sell hundreds of heart-shaped napkin rings. You don't really sell a lot of the big works. But you do the big works because you love them. The heart-shaped napkin rings you make so that you can afford to do the ones you love. That's probably not the best way to phrase that. But at any rate, so there's a part of me is like, I could do something neat and gimmicky with painting on something tiny. But if nobody's looking for it and nobody's paying attention to that thing, then it's something I'm doing for me, which is fine. If it's something I'm doing for my own experience and experimentation, that's one thing. But if I can get something that pays enough to make it so that I could do that, no, I think for the most part, like a dried rice doesn't really go bad. And they usually seal it inside these tiny little bottles like the ones I have here. The one I have the origami in. I can imagine they do sometimes, they might put a seal coat on it. But like a bottle that size, you could put the grain of rice in, or even a little smaller than that, honestly. Put the grain of rice in there when it's done. Like I could play with doing these origami pieces. But I don't know that there are a lot of people out there looking for micro origami. And so it's not a heart-shaped napkin ring. It's not something that people are looking for enough of that I could use it to support the baseline level of doing other artwork. You could, that would be interesting, like a clear capsule. Actually, you know what would be epic? If I could figure out a way to do a tiny ship in a bottle. Like truly, truly tiny. That would be amazing. If you could do microscopic ships inside of tiny bottles. And I know there are like pendant like capsules that you can get that are, they almost look like the little bulbs on a string of Christmas tree lights. They have little pendant capsules like that you can put I don't know what they're thinking you can put in them, but I could see getting a capsule like that and building something tiny in it. Oh, that would be interesting. Pill capsules could be fun too. I did see that there was a guy who, I think it was a guy in India. He did oil painting on the surface of a grain of rice. and they're like portraits of George Washington and stuff like that in oil paints. And I learned a few very important things from discovering that. One of them is oil painting is chosen for a very specific reason, because oil paints take forever to dry. And something like an acrylic or a watercolor, you can't get enough of the liquid that would dry out before you even get it to the grain of rice. So oil paints have that working time that you can put down the paint on the grain of rice, and yes, it's a very thin, very tiny dot. And it gives you the time you need to work on it. The other thing is I learned how at least one of them makes their brushes to do work that small, because you can't use like a single hair, because a single hair, it doesn't take up the liquids the right way. So like an oil or some of the epoxies or other materials that you might use like that, they would form a bead on the end of a single hair. So there's one guy basically said what he does is he gets carbon fiber, he frays the fiber and takes 2 or 3, maybe 5 of the fibers, and he binds them together, and he uses like I think a 1/16 of an inch length on them, and that's what he uses for his brushes. I could see maybe playing with that and seeing what I could do with that. With a microscope, make some brushes, get a little bit of the oil paints. I do think you'd probably still have to use some thinner to get a thin enough quantity of it. But I don't know. I haven't played with it yet. I'm very curious to see what I could do with it. I mean, I think I don't know how well paints like that would adhere to like metals, because there's a part of me like a metal BB, like painting on a metal BB, like make a painting of the globe, or paint Mars on a metal BB, like Earth, Mars, the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, like get metal BBs and paint the planets on them. That would be fun. I would totally get into doing something like that. What else could we paint on? Like, what else is super small in our daily life? That's sort of weird. Like that, I was thinking just for a second, like, I bet you there's certain creatures with teeth small enough. So like a mouse tooth. I bet you could paint onto a mouse tooth. At that point, though, there's a part of me that wonders, like, if you're going to use tiny bits of bone, like I could go back to that idea of like the owl pellets and find the tiny toe bones of a creature, glass beads. It might be a little bit hard to paint on a glass bead. A glass isn't really well known for holding on to pigments. So you could probably build up a little on the surface of it, but if it moves at all on the container, it's gonna smear it. But like I could see like carving the tiny toe bones of a mouse in a filigree or something like that, or make a sculpture out of it. Acid etch the glass bead. That would be weird. I don't know how small a glass bead you can get, and if they're small enough to be noteworthy to paint on. I do have to wonder, if you put them in an etching solution, would they just dissolve instantly? You could have some fun with stuff like that. I feel like if I could figure it out right, if I could use that microscope, oh, that would be very interesting to try. If I could use a microscope, I might be able to take like the copper foil used for stained glass, like a Tiffany style stained glass. The copper foil is adhesive backed, but it's so very thin. So back when I used to make my origami insects, like the praying mantis, the cricket, the dragonfly, those kinds of things, I would get thicker copper flashing with an adhesive back, adhere it to the paper that I was using as the template, do the cutting of the shapes out, and then folding the copper foil into the finished shape. Now, if we move that to a very small scale, I could see doing that on a copper Tiffany style stained glass adhesive strip, sticking that down to some template designs and cutting those out and folding them into the finished shape that should fit inside one of those tiny bottles. I could almost see that happening. And if that's the case, can you paint on them? Heck, I don't know that I even would need to do the copper foil. I'm wondering if I could learn the patterns well enough or figure out a way to stamp out the patterns on the foil. Use aluminum foil, thin aluminum foil, punch out the basic shape of the insect fold template, fold the insect, and then because of the small scale it's at and the folding of it, it will be stiffer at that scale. Just sort of like this origami vase is made out of wrapping paper, and it's folded bigger than they usually are, so it's very soft. If I were to fold it smaller, it'd be more rigid. I bet you if I did yeah, and I would wager you the aluminum foil would be rigid enough that it would stand sort of like a paper clip or plant wire. Like something like this is very thin wrapper from like a Halloween candy. And I would wager you that at super small scales, the rigidity of it should be enough that it would stand up and self-support and be robust enough against moving around inside a little glass jar. I wonder if I could paint on the surface of it, though. I've never tried to paint on aluminum foil. I don't know how it works. I'll have to look into that. And I have to admit, I also got a little sidetracked the other day because somebody was talking about, I don't know where it landed on my head. Like somebody was talking about artworks, and it was a video where somebody said recently an artist made, I think it was $3.5 million selling certain types of art. And so I'm like, okay, let's see. Like, it's usually an auction gallery that sells works for millions of dollars, and the artist never sees that money. So there's a part of me is like, okay, like, what piece of misinformation are we going to end up using here? And as I looked into it, no, there's a market out there for a very different kind of art, and it's digital art. And they've built it around the idea that they're non-fungible tokens. They're basically connecting digital art to a blockchain like in Bitcoin. And I had this idea years ago. I didn't have any understanding of how to do it, but the idea that you could sell artwork almost as if it were a currency itself, and build a sort of a methodology for doing that. So I looked into that, and it's one of those things you fall down a rabbit hole and you go like, this could be very interesting. So there are ways to do artwork of a digital variety, but there are also ways to make a non-fungible token out of, say, like I wanted to do with the ZD artwork that I did, where I worked on a piece of ZD. The existing piece can exist in the real world. The digital version of that, like the pictures taken of it or whatnot, are sort of like a limited edition digital print. And the thing about blockchain is, blockchain itself is an existing record of its own usage. So you can legitimately, like, there's no duplicating a blockchain-based artwork, because you can't duplicate the identifying sequence that makes it the digital currency that they're using. You can't duplicate the non-fungible token. You could make a copy of the picture, but it's not going to be the non-fungible token, the NFT. And so that's a potential way of marketing works that would otherwise be difficult to transfer. So, like, one of the things I did when I was doing the acrylic painting this past weekend, or was it the end of last week? Anyway, playing with the acrylic painting, one of the things you do to get cells to appear in the middle of the painting was to put some oil in there. And that oil, because oil is lighter than the aqueous solution of the pigment and suspension, it'll float to the top. So you take advantage of that, where you put it on top, and when you invert the cup, all the pigment goes down onto the canvas and starts sticking, and the oil forces its way up through, dragging paint behind it and popping on the surface. You get these different colors that spread out as little, like, geyser patterns or magma bubble pops. And so you do those kinds of experiments with artwork. Sort of losing my train of thought. When I was doing that, I got oil on a piece of paper, and it reminded me of the project I wanted to do of painting with oils. Not like oil paint, but when you go, sometimes you'd go to a Subway or a restaurant and get a sandwich, and they wrap it in paper, and you get it home, and you open the paper, and the oil has soaked into the paper and made the paper almost as clear as glass. But the rest of the paper would be like a white butcher paper. And so I had this idea a while back of, like, could I make a piece of artwork with that? So say I had a background like this, I had a white piece of butcher paper, and I used an oil to make certain areas that I paint on clear to what's behind it. Then you're making artwork using butter or oil or things like that. And so I kind of wanted to do that. The problem is an artwork like that, the oil, yes, it will let you see what's behind it for a short period of time, but it will gradually wick further through capillary action between the fibers of the paper, further and further out. Basically, like when you take a Sharpie marker and you draw on a piece of construction paper, they tend to bleed. And that's what's going to happen with oil on any surface like I'm talking about. So it's going to be an artwork. You can make an artwork that'll last for 10 minutes. But once that 10 minutes is up, it's up. The piece is going to self-destruct. But if you make a piece, take a picture of it, and make it a non-fungible token for cryptocurrency and crypto art, it's a potential way of selling artworks like that. Or I think when we were talking about the blood and the urine-based artworks that other artists have made, and what it would be like to do that, and how there may be limits on whether or not you can transport it because of transporting blood is, there's legal things about it. So, like, there are ways that you can make the artwork that people wouldn't want to have the actual artwork, but you can make a limited non-fungible token out of it and make it a sellable piece of work again. So I kind of fell down that rabbit hole and got very interested in that the other day. So, I mean, I don't know that I don't know that I'm going to become a professional artist doing some of my weird art projects, but I do kind of want to play in the field a little bit. And I do have some artist friends that I can do a little learning and help promote and see if we can learn a little about the process of getting a successful art brand off the ground, I guess. Just as a curiosity thing for me. It would be nice to be able to sell some artworks and have that be, if not the entirety of my income stream, at least a nice side hustle. But for now, we are approaching 45 minutes, and I am really wiped out. I have had no sleep, so I need to call it. I need to eat something before I go to sleep, otherwise I'm going to be very sick for the next few days. Today is Sunday, so I guess my next time on is Tuesday. And we're in a new month pretty much at this point in my time zone. We're in March, which I believe is March to Your Own Tune, which is make an album of 7 songs, no less than 31 minutes in total length, by the end of the month. I have no usable music skills. It'll be interesting to see what I can do. This might be one of the ones I definitely fail. I'm going to say that up front. I might not make it through this one, but I'm going to give it an honest try. March. After that is magic tricks and stand-up comedy routines for April Fool and Around. May is photo album. So that's sort of on the platter as we come. But for now, dinner and sleep. I want to thank you for joining me. I hope your sister's doing well. It is your sister, right? Yeah. Well, happy birthday on the 7th. How far away is that? 7 days, right? It's Sunday, so a week from tonight. Should we do something for your birthday on the live stream? That's good. My landlord / friend is still dealing with COVID, so it's been pretty much a week at this point. So hopefully he's he's getting better because the added stress is too much. All right. Take care. I'm going to go eat and sleep. Take care. Goodbye. I'm forgetting something, but I'll catch you later. Brain